Hello and welcome to episode 18 of 2D game development in Flutter. We are developing a game that will be multiplayer. And I know that last episode I promised that we would basically work on the the ammo, right? Basically, that once you fire too many shots, we will basically decrease the ammo that you have, and then there'll be a way to gear up on ammo if you collect certain things. But I decided actually it's time to think a little bit about how can we make this a multiplayer game. And at this point, we could argue just for playing around and trying things out how they would work. We have enough. We don't need this feature that we're going to add. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to do some cleanups, and then we're going to look at how can we separate the code that we currently have into code that can run on the server, or maybe both on the client and server, and then into code that only can run on the client. So basically, if we depend on Flutter, that means that code could never run on the server, and that is regardless if we actually run the server in Dart, like we could write the server in Dart itself, or if we decide to maybe kind of compile our Dart to JavaScript and then write the server in Node.js, for instance. I'm still not sure which route we'll go, but in both cases, we need to separate out these parts of the code because Flutter is not something that exists in either a command line application or the server. So first of all, we'll start with some cleanups. I looked through the code and I found some little things that I didn't like. For instance, in the tile position, we renamed yesterday, we added a toOffset function that is basically misleading, right? We don't know that it's actually going to convert it to a world position first. So we're just going to rename this to world offset. We don't want to rename it to world position offset, but now it's clear enough to everyone that if we call this, for instance, here we're calling it that we're actually converting the tile position to a world position offset. The next thing, in the bullet explosion sprite, we had we added this if done return here, but I realized that we already covered this in the base class, right? So we don't need to do that here again. There's in the sprite animation, yeah, sprite sheet animation, there was one little thing where we had duplicate code. Basically what we're doing here, this part here, right, is exactly the same code as reset. So we might as well just call reset and be done. And another thing is we don't really need the Cupertino icons here at all because we're not using that. And so also I said we don't want any dependencies. We only want Flutter. So that should take care of that. So at this point, I'll just do packages get. So even though we didn't add anything, just to make sure everything is still fine. And then we'll run the game. And I'll start it up while I'll do the... Okay, so now we have analysis issues. So I made a mistake here. Okay, we need a semicolon. So let me actually rerun this. So we start this up, and while this is starting up, we just look real quick through the changes. We removed that here, totally fine. Yeah, we changed that to world position, right? Using the reset function. Yeah, that's related to the world position. And then here this should have gotten removed, yes. So in the pubsec log that got removed. Now let's see if our game is still running. Okay, the explosions are still happening, control still happening. We hit the wall. If we hit the wall a lot, we should lose health. Yeah, that's still working. So everything's still working. We are golden. So we can just select all this and check this in. So we'll say code minor cleanups. All right, so we're done with that. Now we can get to the part where we will actually separate out the controller code. So let's take an example here. Let's close all this. okay, let's close everything and just look at the player, for instance. The player basically is doing two things. One, it has this update model, which basically is controller code. It basically says, let's look at my model, right? Let's look at my player model, and in this case also the stats model. And then let's look at how much time has passed, right? Here we have the time. And now basically let's simulate what would have happened in that time and update all my models. So this is all that it's doing. And that has nothing to do with the UI. This is just basically simulating kind of a world that our game relies on, right? And then we have render code. And now you can see the render code relies on canvas, and the canvas is defined in .ui, right? That is no, you can see that that's a rendering engine, Sky Engine here. That has no place in the server, for instance, right? So we cannot have that there. So what we'll do, we'll create, we'll keep this in here now. We'll create a new folder here, package, I think, controllers. And we'll add a new Dart file, call it player controller. And now we basically move everything over there that is that's just controller code. So first of all, we have to obviously create the class player controller. And this is a little bit tedious work. We won't see in this, at least in this one episode, the first hour here, we won't see too much changes to the game. Too many changes to the game, but it's definitely necessary, and it gets us on the road to then make it multiplayer. So basically, we'll start just by copying that update method and then go from there. It will tell us what things are still missing. So first of all, we need to so the game key, right? So where is that defined? The game key is defined as part of the game keyboard, but the game keyboard kind of references as raw keyboard, so we cannot have that in the same file, right? So what we need to do, there are inputs. Maybe what we'll do is we could put it here. We could put it in types. Let's just for now make a Dart file. We call it input types, and we'll make sure that right, the same here, the aggregation gesture. We need to pull that out here because, as you can see, we're even mentioning Flutter material here, which definitely cannot be, even if you don't use it, right? Even if like we end up not using this on the server, just pulling in these libraries won't work. So we'll take this out. We want to just move the class. Let's see if it allows me to do that. It doesn't allow me to do that, so we'll do it by hand. So we'll move that to input types. And okay, now this is the problem, right? The required thing. As you can see, this comes from Foundation and is in Flutter. And I kind of don't like this. Like, I don't understand why this is not part of Flutter itself. So what I'm actually going to see is like, okay, where is this defined? It's defined in this meta package. And there's really no reason why this is here. There's also immutable, which we're also using. So what we'll do is we'll pull both of these. Well, let's start with the required by itself. We'll pull this into our game somehow. I'm going to make a new Dart file for this. I'm going to call it Dart types because they're basically already part of. We don't need all these comments, but they're already part of Dart, but a Flutter. So we want them in our code, so we need to have them here without referencing Flutter. So let's see if that works. So it doesn't allow us to pull that in for some reason. Yeah, I'm not sure what. I guess. Oh well. Okay. So yes, I think there's one part they were missing still. So let's go back and so this is a part we're missing. Let's add them to our Dart types here. So now we should be able to pull this in from our own, yeah. So now we can say this comes from here. I hope this works the same way. So what we can do actually, we can test this real quick in a second. We can test that if we don't pass in rotation, for instance, that it gives us a warning, because these attributes are basically used mainly at compile time, just to remind us that we're missing a parameter or something like that. So really, there's no reason why we would want to pull in the entire Flutter thing just to have those. So we can copy that over as well into our input types. And now what we can do basically, in here we obviously need to pull this in. And also in our gestures, we need to pull in the gesture type, the aggregated gestures. All right, so now you can see that the input types now have no reference to Flutter at all, right? Which is what we wanted. So now what we can do, we can pull in the game key here without having to pull, without referencing Flutter indirectly. Now let's go to the player model. So the models also are also using the these foundation types here that are coming from Flutter. So we need to make sure that we are pulling them from our own types. And so for now, we'll leave it there. We'll have to do this for everything. Here we have a stats model. Okay, so this is a problem. We're using, it might be a problem or it might not be, depending on if .async is available as a server, and I think it should be. So it's not a problem, but even if it was, we could just pull this part out because we don't need this on the server. Because we don't have to have that stream, right? We're not trying to update a HUD on the server. Okay, so we got that figured out. Let's look at the bullet model. Also is using the foundation just to get that required thing in here. So we're going to use our own. Create model. Okay, so there we have to be somewhat careful, right? There's a bunch of there are a bunch of classes that is pulling in tile position. So we have to make sure that tile position is not referencing any of the foundation either. So we have to move that out. And what we might do at some point, okay, so now we need the immutable type. Okay, so what we'll do, we'll just pull in this class, and as you can see, these are really simple things. I have no idea why they have to live in Flutter. Right, they're really small things. So now we're going to pull this in to our dot types, and so now we should be able to remove this and say this is coming from our dot types. And now obviously, like, what might happen is if that it doesn't work anymore. So if I make this not final, it should, well, we'll check that in a second. If it doesn't actually work to give us the correct warnings, then we'll have to try to find another way. Okay, so that was the create model. So now create model. So using game props. Game props we'll go there in a second. But basically, what we need to do, actually, this has nothing to do with. It's an image asset, and an image asset is just a class. It has nothing to do with the UI. Even though we're mentioning images here, but it's just strings and numbers. Tile map we cleaned up. The bullet model, right? The bullet model should be fine. The player model we just cleaned up. The game model still has this foundation reference, and we fixed that already. So if you move that. Okay, so now we should be happy. Now, obviously, this code is not happy at all. Let's import the player model and the stats model, and then we can see already which parts of the player do we actually need. So, so this update method will be removed. Well, actually, we keep it here for now, but we'll basically. Yeah, let's keep here. Basically, what we want to do for our game for now, we'll just forward all the calls that are controller calls. We'll just forward them to the controller. So now we can also see easily which functions are no longer used, and those are the ones that are actually belonging into the controller. So I think it's all of those. All right, and so now we can see that some of these things are missing. So we're missing the thrust sprite, and we're missing physics. Okay, so physics, we have to make sure that physics does not reference anything from Flutter or UI related. Where did I put physics? Okay, let's just do this and then we can go there. So physics is using an offset from .ui, and that's maybe a problem. Even though I'm not sure. It might work as well on the server, but you can kind of see Flutter authors, right? So but let's just see where the offset's coming from. Can we import it? So it doesn't allow us to import it from anywhere, but it says .ui, right? I mean, there's this small hope that maybe it's not a problem. It doesn't really have anything Flutter related that I can see, so we'll leave it here for now. We leave the offset getting imported from there. You can see that it's actually just a geometry, but this is the rendering engine, so it might actually be a problem if you're trying to import it. In the worst case, we'll have to. I mean, this is all just is not really UI related code. This is just mathematics, right? But it lives in .ui. So in the worst case, we'll have to pull out the offset and move it somewhere else. But I won't do this yet because it might not be a problem. So world position, we have to make sure that we don't use foundation here. Use our own types. And also here we are using .ui, and now it helps to have the show. Okay, so we're using that for the offset again. So I'm going to put show on all these .ui things for now to get a better understanding of where these are coming from or what we're using from .ui. So here we're using the foundation. We can't do that. We have to make that our own type. Yeah, okay, fine. So now the offset will have to come from .ui for now, and we put a show there. What else do we need? Keyboard rotation factor. Now some of these are here, right? We have to look at what do we need. The keyboard rotation factor we will need, and the keyboard thrust force, also the thrust sprite. Okay. So obviously, the thrust sprite we can't really import. We have to find a way to separate the controller part of the thrust sprite. So for now, we'll kind of comment this part out, and we'll just get in the keyboard rotation factor and the thrust force, and then we'll have a constructor. We copy this for now. Player controller. And we'll just remove all this that we don't need. I think collider add we are using. Well, let's see what else is missing here. 2pi. Definitely don't need that here anymore. Collider add isn't a field. Okay, yeah, so we do need collider. Well, do we need collider add though? I think we should. Yes, we do need collider add. So this is all controller related code, right? So we have that. Let's do this for now, and then we'll move things over one by one as we need them. We need pi from the math library. Okay, let's see. Wall hit health toll factor. And I think we need the wall hit slowdown as well. So let's put this also in the constructor. Okay, now we will look at tile position. Need to import that. Okay. Then there is a get hit tiles. Where is that coming from? Import from hit tiles. Okay, so now we have to look there to make sure that we don't use this one, for instance. Clean that up. And we already know that the tile position and the world position are clean of UI code. So we're good there. Game key. That should be an easy one. Just import that. We already cleaned that up. Hit size. We need the hit size. That is a variable that we need to set in the constructor. All right, now we're actually good. We have an unused import math here now. That makes sense. If you just save, it should probably go away. Yes. Okay. Now we have controller code that is clean. Basically what we'll do here, so this is the controller, right, will be used inside the server. And now we have two options. Either we make the player wrap the controller and also render, or we keep it clean and say this is only the render code, and actually maybe move that even into a folder called visuals, and the game visually will then go and update all the controllers, and there will be a game controller that updates all the controllers, and there will be a game visuals or renderer that will call all the renders. And I think that's probably the cleaner path. So what we should probably do is we should look at like what do we not need from here anymore. And unfortunately, it's not telling us that certain parameters here are like going totally unused. So this one, totally unused, right? The thrust forward is as well. The tile size, let's see, is used for the thrust sprite. Okay. So we need that. The hit size might still be used somewhere in rendering. Okay. The wall hit slowdown, most likely not, nor the slowdown factor. And the thrust animation duration, that's part of the thrust sprite. So that's definitely UI part. And then the collider edge shouldn't be used anymore. Okay, so we can remove that. So now we clearly separated out what we are using inside the renderer and what are we using inside the controller. And then you can see here the thrust sprite is a problem that we'll have to solve. But for now, we'll just do it without the thrust. So as you can see here, the thrust sprite also has an update method and it has a render method. So what we'll need to do is, and then we have the sprite sheet animation that gets updated. So we cannot depend on the at least. So the sprite sheet animation obviously depends on the sprite. So let's just walk through this. The sprite sheet depends on the sprite. Now here we could remove that, but let's look a little further. So here we have paint. So the sprite is mainly about rendering, right? So if you look here, we have our list of sprites and we don't actually, in the sprite sheet, so the sprite sheet is also fairly UI centric, which means you don't even have to get rid of the foundation here. We can't most likely mention the sprite sheet in a controller. But as you see here, the update function, right, doesn't mention at all any sprites. So what we'll probably need to do, we need to have a sprite sheet animation controller and a sprite sheet animation renderer. Most likely what we'll do into the render function, so here you can see sprite sheet.getIndex, right? So we'll basically, if we just say get the sprite and we'll pass in the controller somehow to figure out what's part of the sprite sheet we need to render, that will work. So we can definitely separate that out. For now, we want to get this back to compiling. So I will, yes, I will just basically create a controller here for now, and then we'll keep going and check this in. So we can then say we at least separated out the controller of the player, at least partially. So what we can do here is we can say player controller is a new player controller. And now some of these things that it doesn't like here actually go in here, right? Okay, and now actually what is this player image path thing? We don't need that here. Okay. So what I don't like, what I'm seeing is, well, let's just do this. First of all, instead of doing player update, we do player controller update, and then we can go into our player. Can do go into our player and basically remove the entire update function here. We don't need that anymore. And as you can see, like, since we are working on models, right, it doesn't matter that we are now updating the model in an entire different place than we are rendering it, right? So the renderer just expects the model to be already prepared for rendering, and the controller basically does it. And now we have a problem though. I don't know if you notice, but we are definitely missing some. So let's just open the player controller in a separate tab here, and then the game in this tab, and you can see that we are missing some. We're missing the keyboard rotation factor, I think, right? No, sorry, up here, right? So we have the keyboard, we have the force, we have the slowdown, whatever, but we're missing the hit size, and we're missing at least like one. So, and it's not telling us about this. And the problem is, why is it not telling us? Because we're using our own required implementation, but somehow, if we now use Foundation, now suddenly we get this warning, right? So just moving this type over to where we wanted it didn't do the job. So let's look at what's the difference here. Maybe there's some magic comment that they put on top. That's my last hope. It doesn't seem like it, unfortunately. It seems like the tools are looking exactly for that required. Now we can do a little trick. What we can do is we can basically say that we'll put this class here, and then basically comment this out, and then we say export. What is this class called? Foundation. So let's go back to our player. So basically what we'll do, we export this here from here. Okay. Something like this maybe. I'm going to look this up. I'm not doing this too much. Dart export other module. So should it work like this actually? Okay, so why is it not happy? Because we're not a library? Oh, okay. So we had it correct, we just needed to have it on top. Alright, so basically I don't like this very much, but somehow what we could do maybe on the server, when we're running on the server, we somehow change this file to actually not export it, and instead, but it still provides us these variables that we can use as annotations, so that we can still use them. And it doesn't seem to work the way we want it to. Let's see. Okay, yeah, we can import it from here. Okay, fine. And now we get our warning. So at least like if we start, forwarding all these imports into this module, at least now we have a central place where we could then say, okay, well, all I'm going to have to do is comment this out, remove this, and now I'm back to this, and I can run this on the server because now I do no longer depend on this, right? So we'll have to see how we best do this. And now it's warning us that we need the hit size, so we'll pass in the hit size as well. All right, and now we should be able to launch our game and have it running without any problem, because nothing of the behavior should change, right? We just refactored the code to prepare for running some of the controller code on the server. Nothing more, nothing less. All right, so it's still running, it's still working, we can shoot, still have explosions. Okay, cool. So we can check that in. Actually going to do this here, there's going to be a lot of code. So not going to look through all this code. We kind of were aware of what we did. So I'm going to say code factoring out, well, I'm going to say actually player, this is part of the player stuff. Factoring out player controller. All right, and yeah, these are like the days where you're not progressing with the game, but those are things that you need to do. So now if you look at our player controller, where is it? Our player controller. It should be free of, okay, so this is offset thing. So actually what we can do, we're just going to try to run this file with Dart, and let's see if that works. So what we'll do, we already have a configuration here that can run the tile map, right? So we'll just copy that, and then we'll try to see if we can run the player controller by itself with just Dart. That's kind of our test that we can do. So we have lib, I think it's game controllers, and then player controller Dart. So let's see what happens here. If we run that, and we can run that basically, yeah, we don't have to run it on the Mac desktop, it should just run. Okay, so now we have problems, right? Not found Dart UI. So that means we need to create our own offset. Right, because Dart has no notion of Dart UI. That's part of Flutter, even though it's called Dart UI. I wonder if we do, there's a tool called Dart2JS, which you might try. 2JS, and we might just try how that will basically how that will react, or if there maybe it has the ability to somehow make the Dart UI work for us. Maybe there's an implementation for the web. I think it's like this. Okay, so this, okay, so we need to say this is the output. All right. Okay, so we have the same problem, right? Yeah, so offset not found, right? So we can see that there's no way, even if we were to, like, for instance, try to compile this code to JavaScript, we still need to get rid of all the Dart UI imports. Okay, so let's look at the offset. I'm just actually, oh, okay, so there's an offset base as well. We're going to be just brutal, and we're just going to copy this out of here. Okay, so hold on to your seats. Let's copy this, and basically I'm going to copy this as well into dart types. But here we have, so let's just put this into, this actually could be part of an engine. So we're going to call this offset. And we just go put that in here. Hash values. Okay, so yeah, that's the things we don't really care much about. If we don't, let's just say we don't implement this equality thing, then we don't have to worry about the hash values. But basically, the original offset has that. The hash values, and basically what's happening here is this comes from also the Sky engine, and it's pretty big. I've looked at this before. We don't want this thing. We don't need it. So what we'll do instead, we'll just not have the equals operator until we need it. If we need it ever, so right, if you remove the hash code, you also have to remove the equals override. So we're happy with that. And now we have no error. Now we'll go back to the okay, so here now we're going to implement the offset. We're going to copy that part out. And we're going to see that it's actually probably not even that big. Offset. Okay. So hash values, same problem, right? Okay, and then we need to get rid of the equality thing as well. Okay, and then so lerp. Okay, so lerp double. Let's look at where that was defined. If we can either copy that or if it maybe doesn't make sense. Okay, yeah, we can copy that. That's small enough, right? So we'll put that into our thing. And by the way, what we're doing here is not necessarily like a very typical thing, but as you can see, we're kind of just trying to run the start on the server. That's all we're trying to do. Okay, undefined class. Now we're running into other stuff. Undefined name math. Well, math we can get. Math. Well, why can't we? Why doesn't it allow us to import it? Right. Okay. So now we can get that. Still complaining. Oh. As math. Okay. So now that's happy. Okay. So now it's complaining that we don't have size, and we don't have. So we're gonna go into the implementation here. Okay. So we need to. So what I'm gonna do is the engine. I'm actually going to make a different package for this. I'm going to say this is geometry. So we don't have it all together in all kind of places, right? So not all kind of mixed. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move that guy in here. And also what I'm going to do is I'm going to factor out the offset base, because as we already started seeing, this one is used by also size. I already saw that in the code. So offset, it's called the offset base. Copy that in there, and now we go back to offset, and then I don't know. It's not complaining because this is part of .ui. So, but what we'll do is we go find the size, and we'll copy that class out and put that into a new file called size. And this is kind of, I'm not a huge fan that we have to do this, but basically that's the only way we can get rid of .ui. And as I said, all this is just basically, it's just geometry code. There's no reason why this actually has to live in the UI code, right? We're basically just having to make up here for the fact that this was not done. This was not separated ideally yet. So the same goes for Rect. So let's see where we have the Rect. Okay, here we have a Rect. So we're going to go here and copy that out. All right, and they have it all in one file, but we'll have them separately. Oh, you know what? We could have just geometry. Yeah, what we'll do. yeah, you know what we will do? We'll just do this. We'll start over and we'll just copy this entire file. Because this is a geometry file, right? So, okay, let's go back, delete this, and then delete the folder. Well, let's keep it around because we might have our own geometry. So we're going to make a Dart geometry file. All right. And so then we'll just copy the entire file into our file, remove the mention of Dart, part of Dart UI. So we'll keep the copyright on top here just in case, to be nice. And okay, now we have float list. Ours runs from what in the world is it? So we don't, okay, so we probably copied a little bit too much here. What is this? Do we need this anywhere? Yeah, we don't need this. And then we have the same thing with the hash values, right? We just don't compare offsets for equalities like that, and then we're good. Okay, what? Okay, here we go. So, the raters we don't even need. We're not using, so we're not going to copy anything we don't need. We're not using the Rect. We don't want to run it rectangle yet. That's something you actually use probably more for Flutter. Yeah, for Flutter widgets. So this one we also don't need. All right, and now hash values. Now basically everywhere we have these hash values. I mean, it might almost make sense to copy this in, but we're not going to, because we don't really need. If you ever want equality, we'll find a different way to do this. And then also every time you remove the hash code override, you also need to remove the equality one. So we just got this one more, and then we got this lerp double, which we'll have to. We just have to copy this over again. That function was short enough. So what we'll do, we'll just import it for now, go there and copy it, and go back, and then instead of importing it, we'll just put it here. Okay, now float list. Why are we talking about float list? We don't need, okay, so let's see. Who's needing that? No one. All right. So now we just have math. So we'll just say import this as math. Hoops. Okay. So now we should be fine. So okay. So now basically what we'll have to do is, for instance, in the spreadsheet animation. Sorry, not here, but wherever we're using the so let's just run our file again and let's see where we run into problem in physics, for instance, right? So we are not going to import it from here. What we're going to do instead, we import it from our own geometry, and we're also going to say show offset, right? So now what we can do actually, to enforce this, we are going to search through our project for this, and we're going to do a replace. Actually, we're going to do it like this. What we're actually going to do, we're going to search for Dart UI imports. Yeah, okay, so what we actually want to do, we want to do a search replace. So I can't remember the shortcut for that, so we'll look it up. Replace. So we'll look for .ui and we'll replace it with this, right? Okay, so one other way to say I want to replace this, but not all of them. But let's just say, yeah, I guess we can say replace. right? This isn't a bullet in the game. Yeah, let's do it. Images, yeah, anywhere, basically, pretty much anywhere makes sense. It's the same implementation, so we might as well use it everywhere. Okay. Okay, so this isn't a valid override. Oh, because now we're importing canvas also from there. So canvas doesn't exist here, so we need to fix this in all these places. That's fine. So here we need to import. So that's not cool. So like basically, yeah. So the game will have to be separated out, right? We already start seeing that. The game will have to start. So we're gonna put a show operator here, but basically, the game itself will also have to be separated into update and render if you want to use that game class. But we might not even use that game class in the server directly. We might just have another class that we use instead. So the offset. So basically, right. So this won't work. This has to be .ui. So we actually made a mistake to just replace all of them. UI. Okay. But this is important to have the show here, so we know we're not getting an offset from there. So offset. Okay, let's see what's it's saying. The valve type is okay. So we're having two different offsets going on. But I'm not getting it. I'm not. Oh, I'm not sure why it's complaining. This offset needs to come from our geometry, right? And so this offset should come also from our geometry. So I don't understand why it's not automatically offering us that. Oh, I know why. Because we have this material here. That's so this is kind of where. So the required thing we don't want to come from there either necessarily. We want actually the required thing to come from our library. You can start to see that this is a little. I mean, the thing is what's complicating all this that these things that are actually not UI related are in the Flutter framework, which is UI related. So here you have the same problem, right? We don't want. So what is it complaining about here? Draw a circle, canvas, draw a circle, center. Oh, okay. So you can see when. So when we do to offset here, right, we are using our offset. But we need to convince the framework that when we render it, yeah, this is painful. Okay. Because obviously like the canvas here, they want the dart offset, right? This one. Now we can cast it. So we could say S. So what we can do here, so we have the dart UI and we can show the other offset. Because we have our own offset here, right? So what we can do is we can say can we do something like, can we show offset as something else? UI offset. I guess we can't. I thought I've seen this somewhere. But what we can do though is we can say import dart UI as DUI, no pun intended. And then basically what we can do here where it's complaining, we can say cast it as DUI.offset. And I don't even know if this is going to work because it is a different class. but it is the same thing. So it's actually kind of good that we ran into this early, because what's happening is we might run into this problem where this actually won't work at all. So why is it complaining here? Because here we're taking our own size. Okay. So we actually need to do the opposite. So we need to actually say import this thing, right, as let's call it geometry or something. Let's make it shorter as geo. Okay, it went away because we saved and we didn't use it yet. But when we go back to our problem, geo, so we're going to say as geo dot offset. So what is it complaining about now? Oh, it needs to be size. Okay, fine. All right. So how many more? So we have 19 of those. Okay, so paint and all the stuff is not there, so we need to say wait, let's just copy this and say .ui. And then we just remove the stuff that we don't import from there. And also we need to, it seems like we need to get the, so yeah, okay, fine. So we got that. Now we're down to 14 errors. So now we have to draw the image, Rect, but this Rect we're using is not the one, right? So we have to import .ui as DUI again and fix that with a cast basically. So now let's go back to here where this was complaining. So we're going to say as DUI dot I think it's a Rect, right? And then the same here as DUI dot Rect. Okay. Method paint isn't defined. Okay, so yeah, we need to get that from .ui. .ui. So we need to get that from here, and we need to basically make sure that we don't import it from here. Okay. And it's good that we put these shows, otherwise it would be much harder to see what's going on. And now, oh, okay, so now we need to do the same thing as DUI. And I don't want to put, someone might be asking, why am I just not doing that? That might work, but I don't want to have to do that all the time. So we can actually do here, since we're rendering, we can say, so here's the question, do we even need, where are we using offset? This is a render thing, right? So actually, like, what we can do is we also will import our offset from here, and then this whole problem will go away. Because here we are actually only rendering. The grid has no controller. It will not be used on the server, so we are fine. Decode image from Liz is, yeah, it's not defined on this. So yeah, this is actually not correct at all. It just needs to stay .ui. So in some cases we did this replace where it didn't make sense. So images, for instance, we will not load images on the server. I definitely hope not. So here we have canvas. So now these are simpler. So all we have to do here is import the canvas from .ui. And where to go? Okay, and put the show myth thing there. And that's like the background. Obviously, the background we need to maybe, but the background will not worry about the background on the server, right? So these are things that are not a problem. But it's good that we maybe made this mistake here and imported and changed this in too many places. At least now we get an idea of what's going on and where it makes sense to change it and where it doesn't. So obviously this is a sprite. If there's an update function, we need to take that out later. Let's just leave it for now. and be done with it, because we want to just like see if this actually even works. Okay, so yeah, okay, so we were actually already working with this. So let's just do it that way then. So because we were already, so now we just get hints here. So we got no errors anymore. So what is this saying? Yeah, it's just saying that this doesn't have a canvas. So those are easy to fix. Rect is shown, but it isn't used. Okay, fine. Doesn't have a canvas, and it doesn't have paint either. All right, okay, cool. So at least like before the end of this episode, we are back in compiling state. Let's see if this works now. It might just totally, okay, so we still have this problem, but I want to actually not see that. I want to actually see if our game even still works now. So let's see. I hope so. Okay, so it's okay, so this won't work. This will not work at all. Okay. Okay, but we can fix this, right? What we'll have to do is we will have to we basically, instead of having to cast everywhere we say s as rect or as offset, we actually have to create a new offset. We have to basically make a method that takes our version of the offset and creates an offset for the Dart version, and that will actually work. So for now, actually, I'm going to check this in, even though it's not compiling. So I'm going to say that geometry factoring, or let's just say implementing, or like let's just say what we actually did, ripping our geometry classes, ripping out geometry classes of Dart UI. Okay, so now we just have to create a tag for this episode. Git tag. We already have one for the start, episode 18 end, and I kind of want to finish on time, so we'll push this. Thank you for watching. This is the end of this episode, number 18.